My name is Fraser Hearn. I'm an insolvency and corporate restructuring partner at Walkers in Hong Kong. There's been a really significant growth in foreign direct investment in Asia generally in the last 5 or 10 years, and due to investment restrictions on investors, and also due to investor concerns about the effectiveness of local security laws, the trend that's developed is for foreign investors, and by that I mean non-Asian investors, or specifically non-PRC investors, to invest into the PRC and into Asia via offshore, onshore structures. And what you've actually seen from a numbers perspective is a huge growth in the number of BVI and Cayman companies that are being used to facilitate the injection of capital into the Asian operations. And at last glance, there were approximately 900,000 to 1 million BVI companies in existence and around 100,000 Cayman companies in existence. And it's quite telling that over half of those relate to companies that have operations in Asia, and particularly in the PRC. The position immediately after Lehman, and probably for the 12 to 18 months after that, was one where you saw the Asian economies actually perform much better and seemingly have a more robust system in place than perhaps some of the Western economies, which were faring a lot worse in the immediate aftermath. Because where the investors had an increased supply in capital, they also had an appetite for yield. And if they're looking for yield, then they're, especially at that time, they're really focusing on Asia, and particularly the PRC, where the returns were significantly higher than they were in Western markets. So what we've actually seen in the last 12 to 18 months in Asia is a bit of a shift. You have a situation where the quantitative easing, which was all well and good for the immediate aftermath of Lehman and dealing with the initial shocks, has actually resulted in inflationary pressure throughout the region. And you have a situation now where the governments are taking steps to try and minimise the impact that inflation is having on the wider economies as a whole. With that has come restrictions on the amount of lending that banks are allowed to provide to corporates and to individuals within the economies, given rise to more constrained capital requirements, i.e. banks have got to hold more capital in their accounts as well. So less money in the economy for your average corporate consumer. Now, what does that translate to? It means that companies that are reliant upon leverage, they're reliant upon debt to continue to be able to operate within the market, are now finding it more and more difficult to refinance that debt. And what we're beginning to see is the offshore-onshore structures that we talked about earlier coming under stress, particularly where the operations of the Chinese companies can no longer generate sufficient capital to repay the debts that are owed offshore or repay the debts that are owed onshore. Or alternatively, we're seeing companies with more limited financing unable to explore the opportunities they were able to explore previously, and the IPO market not being available to them to provide the exit that a lot of investors have actually been searching for. One of the key issues that a lot of clients who haven't had involvement in these types of issues or structures before tends to focus on is their immediate enforcement rights, say at an offshore level. Now that's fine, you need to do that, but when you're looking at that, you absolutely need to consider the effect that the steps you take at an offshore level are going to have in the jurisdiction where the value is, which is where the operating companies are onshore within Asia. So pre-enforcement questions are absolutely critical. There must be a strategy that's in place at the outset as to how you're going to deal with issues from an offshore and an onshore perspective. So what is the position of the debtor? What is the position of the incumbent management? Are they hostile, or are they willing to pursue a restructuring? If they're willing to pursue a restructuring, they might be looking at restructuring and mechanics that are specifically available from a Cayman or BVI law perspective that are not available from a local law perspective. Where is the registered agent of the company? What is the position of local creditors within the PRC or within the Asian jurisdiction where they're operating? And how does their position conflict or complement the position of the creditors that operate from an offshore perspective? So all questions that you need to consider before you determine what steps you're going to take. And we've had a number of cases where receivers have tried to take steps in the PRC, only to be found that receivership as a concept isn't something that's recognised as a matter of PRC law. So you take your step, you appoint the receiver, they go into the jurisdiction where the value assets are, and they're rebuffed by the local regulators and local authorities and have to go back and start all over again. Alternatively, you have a situation where you're looking to appoint office holders, so liquidators or provisional liquidators at the offshore level, and get them to do the work to drill down through the structure. Again, a very effective remedy in the right circumstances, but what effect is the appointment of a liquidator or provisional liquidator going to actually have on lending that's been provided onshore? Is that going to trigger cross defaults? Is that going to cause the company to be unable to continue to trade? Questions you need to ask before you decide to take the steps to appoint a liquidator or provisional liquidator. I think the message that needs to be delivered is one where investors realise there is a result to be achieved by taking the right enforcement approach. It's not the same approach that you take in the US, it's not the same approach that you take in Europe. It's a very different approach that you need to take, and in order to understand the strategy you need to employ, the holistic analysis needs to be done right at the outset.